There's so much hype in Boston about James Higgins, and rightly so, but do not sleep on Will Zellers as one of the most exciting prospects the Bruins have had in quite some time.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Thursday, July 10th. Thank you so much for making Locked On Boston Bruins your first listen every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. On today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, we're spotlighting one of the most exciting young names in the organization. It's not James Higgins. It's not Will Moore. It's Will Zellers. Breaking down what makes him such an intriguing prospect following his standout development camp. Then we'll shift gears to discuss the hiring of Ryan Bourque as an assistant coach in Providence and what it means for the Bruins player development pipeline. Before we get into all that, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. You can find me, my hockey thoughts and dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan, and I've been covering this team and the NHL for various outlets for 20 years. And again, you can find the show on X, Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and find me mostly at Blue Sky and Instagram these days. So let's start with the name that might not be super familiar to every Bruins fan yet, but could be before long. And that is Will Zellers. Now, for me, as a Canadian, Zellers reminds me of the Walmart adjacent department store that we had up here for quite some time. It was basically Walmart, Target, where you could get everything you could possibly want in one building. And Will Zellers is kind of that jack of all trades. He grew up in Minnesota with a basement turned into a shooting gallery. And this is from a great profile that Eric Russo did on Zellers on the Bruins website that you should all check out. He would shoot about 10,000 pucks every summer as a kid. Just a relentless work ethic from the very beginning. His dad, Kurt, said that, a guy like Malcolm Gladwell, he has the 10,000 hours of practice, which makes you an expert in any field. Zellers was doing 10,000 pucks when he was around 11, 12, shooting 10,000 pucks every summer, which is really crazy. Now, they would also build a rink in the back. So he was just shooting pucks year round from the very beginning. Now, Zellers, of course, was acquired from Colorado in the Charlie Coyle trade. And Don Sweeney said Boston specifically targeted Zellers in that trade. Yes, they got Casey Middlestat, who could very well be their second-line center this season, but Zellers was a key component of that trade for the Bruins. He dominated at Shattuck and in the USHL, where he set the league's all-time goal record with 44 in a single season. His teammates rave about him. The Bruins staff impressed with his maturity and drive. And this guy could be an incredibly valuable piece for this team moving forward. This was a kid who was devoted to the game from the very beginning. From the family basement where his parents thought they might finish it. Instead, they installed that sniper's edge shooting tarp and 10,000 pucks per summer as a kid, right in Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hour territory. That's how you become a pure shooter. And again, it wasn't just those basement drills. This is a kid who in minus 30-degree weather still wanted to skate on the outdoor rinks, even if practice was canceled. He dominated at Shattuck St. Mary's, 57 goals, 111 points in 54 games during 2023-24 season. Then put up 44 goals in 52 games, breaking the USHL's single season goal record. He said his grandpa called him one night and was like, "You're close to this goal record thing." And Zellers was like, "What?" He wasn't chasing stats. He was just out there scoring. And his teammates, his coaches noticed, and so did the Boston Bruins. The Bruins acquired him in the Charlie Coyle trade along with Casey Mittelstadt. He was specifically targeted, and it's pretty easy to see why. Very interesting that Colorado was willing to part with this guy for just a few months of Charlie Coyle, because Coyle has since been traded to the Columbus Blue Jackets. So the Bruins not only, I know a lot of people are not that big on Casey Mittelstadt and don't see his upside, even though he had back-to-back 50-plus point seasons prior to 2024-25. Even if that trade was just Coyle for Mittelstadt or Coyle for Zellers, that's a pretty big win. But to get both of those guys, to get a guy who could step into the lineup this season and be your second line center, and a promising pure goal scorer in Will Zellers, that's a nice little piece of work for Don Sweeney. And Will Zellers is one of the hottest names in the Bruins prospect pipeline right now. But let's be clear about one thing. He's got nothing to do with the Canadian discount chain your grandma used to take you to after church. This Zellers doesn't stock slippers and diner specials. He racks up goals. 44 of them last season, to be exact. A USHL record. Even when he does make the NHL, it'll be bargain of the year level value from that Charlie Coyle trade. And we'll discuss what makes him so special here as the podcast continues. Do you ever wish that managing your money was a bit easier? With Monarch Money, it can be. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. We looked at our spending and we're so surprised to see how much we were spending on Tim Hortons, streaming services. It adds up so quick. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Thank you so much again for making Locked On Bruins part of your day. It's available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers will know that the best way to get a fresh pod is to subscribe. Each new episode added to your feeds for you to download, listen, and enjoy. So we talked a bit about Will Zellers' background. Let's break down what he brings to the ice and what Bruins fans can realistically expect. He's 5'10", 175 pounds, so no one's going to mischaracterize him as a power forward, but he doesn't have to be. His calling card is pure scoring instinct. And according to Dauber Prospects, he's a highly skilled shooter and puck handler who accelerates with every puck touch. And that, again, comes from that extensive summer training, just shooting, puck after puck after puck. He compares his game to fellow Minnesotan Jake Gensel, and there's definitely some truth there. He's got good edges, quick hands, and a feel for where to be in the offensive zone. Zellers doesn't need many chances to convert, and Adam McQuaid put it well after development camp by saying he doesn't need a lot of opportunities, and he capitalizes on the ones he gets. He's also got some real competitive edge to him, and he's got a little fire, he said. Zellers is also pretty self-aware. He knows that to succeed at the NHL level, especially in a Bruins system that values two-way responsibility, he has to grow his defensive game. And that's something he's openly working on ahead of his freshman season at the University of North Dakota, a powerhouse program that has deep family roots for him. He said, the more you can be trusted in the D zone, the more trust you have from the coaches. Some games you're not going to be scoring, and you've got to find other ways to bring factors into the game. And that's not something that you can do in your basement. It's not something that comes from just being able to put stick to puck and fire puck after puck after puck. It takes practice against real players. It takes experience in game situations, and it means putting yourself out there and perhaps putting team first above getting your stick on the puck all the time. And what's encouraging about Zellers is that he's not just a volume shooter. You can make so much about, those 10,000 pucks, but he's competitive, he's thoughtful, and he's all in on becoming a complete player, even in a time when pure scorers often get by on talent alone. So I'm very excited to track his progression at North Dakota and to see whether he can translate that pure scoring ability into some two-way play that we know the Bruins value. Now, we've discussed before about whether or not it's important to turn every player into a Selke Trophy candidate, whether it's necessary to make sure that everybody is able to defend in their own zone. Like, you need some guys who are just able to score. It needs some guys who are able to put the puck in the net and don't necessarily have to have that two-way brain each and every shift. But at the same time, you can't be out there just floating around. You can't be out there not trying to help your team at both ends of the ice. And so for him to succeed at Nodak, eventually at Providence, with the Boston Bruins, he's going to need to definitely add that part to his game to kind of complement those offensive traits that he has in spades. Look, when it comes to player development, we all know the Boston Bruins have never been a team that chases pure offensive flash at the expense of structure. Yes, they value scoring. They need more of it. They promise to evolve offensively this summer. Not sure if they've quite achieved that with the hiring of Marco Sturm and the players that they targeted in free agency, because scoring can't come with glaring defensive liabilities. And that's one of the reasons why a guy like Fabian Lysell has yet to pop for the Boston Bruins, because they don't necessarily trust him in those situations. That's the balance Will Zellers will need to strike in the years ahead. His goal scoring numbers in the USHL are eye-popping, But what will ultimately determine his NHL season, or ceiling, I should say, is whether he can become a trusted 200-foot player. And he already seems to understand that. He's openly focusing on his defensive zone play and off-puck habits as he prepares for NCAA hockey at Nodak. In a Bruins system that demands buy-in at both ends of the ice, his willingness to evolve from just a sniper to a complete, coachable contributor is what could eventually earn him a roster spot and sustain it. So I'm very, very excited about Will Zellers, his evolution from USHL, eventually, hopefully, to the Boston Bruins. And this is a guy we'll certainly be keeping an eye on here on the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. Now, speaking of Bruins player development pipeline, let's shift gears and talk about a coaching hire that not only strengthens the bench in Providence, but adds another layer to the Bourque legacy in Boston. The Bruins announced that Ryan Bourque, son of Bruins legend Ray Bourque, is joining the AHL's Providence Bruins as an assistant coach. And there's really a lot to like about this hire. According to Mark Diver, who covers the Providence Bruins, this is a solid hire of a coach who lived the AHL grind for years and earned a rep as an inquisitive, hard-working young coach. Now, Bourque didn't quite reach the levels of his dad as a player. He did play 585 games in the AHL, wore letters for the Hartford Wolfpack before retiring in 2020. And since then, he's steadily been building coaching experience. He was an assistant in the ECHL with the South Carolina Stingrays. He had a stint in the U.S. National Team Development Program working with, this may sound familiar, James Higgins. So that perhaps is a nice connection with Higgins. Hopefully, probably playing for Providence at the end of this season, unless he jumps right to the NHL. He also worked with New York Islanders prospect Cole Eiserman, Trevor Connolly of the Vegas Golden Knights. Most recently, he won a championship with Cushing Academy as head coach. And for those of you who don't know, Cushing Academy is a private prep school in Mass. So pretty impressive pedigree built by young Bourque so far. He's only 34 years old, and Bruins fans should hear that as a good thing. He's modern, relatable, known for connecting with young players, especially those grinding to make it to the next level. Providence head coach Ryan Bourque said Ryan Bourque's hockey acumen, attention to detail, and player-first attitude were exactly what the baby Bruins were looking for. And Bourque himself added being fortunate enough to experience the Bruins organization firsthand as a kid. He's not taking for granted the rich history and tradition that comes with representing the Bruins. He already has a connection, like I said, with Higgins and Zellers from his time at the NTDP. And that familiarity combined with AHL know-how makes this a smart development-focused hire as the Bruins retool for the future. And look, when we're talking about Zellers and development tracks, the American Hockey League isn't just a developmental league for players. It's where future NHL coaches are forged as well. Look at Bruce Cassidy, who was head coach in Providence, jumped to the Bruins, then won a cup with the Vegas Golden Knights. For someone like Ryan Bourque, stepping into an assistant coaching role with the Providence Bruins is the perfect next move. It puts him behind the bench in a high-pressure pro environment while still offering the space to grow, experiment, and build his voice as a coach. In the AHL, assistants get hands-on experience with video work, player development, special teams, bench management, And just like players, coaches in the AHL are evaluated by NHL organizations every day. He still has to answer to not just the Providence higher-ups, but Boston as well. We've seen a clear pattern around the league. Guys like Spencer Carberry, who just won the Jack Adams Trophy, Jay Woodcroft, Chris Knobloch, they all cut their teeth in the AHL before moving up. Same with our very own Marco Sturm. If Bourque continues to earn praise for his work ethic, attention to detail, player-first mindset, don't be surprised if he eventually climbs the ladder to an NHL bench. And what a legacy that would continue to build for the Bourque family, one of the greatest players in franchise history. Who knows? Perhaps Ryan could even be head coach of the Boston Bruins one day. The stories of Will Zellers and Ryan Bourque, though different, both speak to the same foundational truth about where the Boston Bruins are headed. Development matters. Zellers is the embodiment of a modern NHL prospect, skilled, driven, offensively gifted, but he's also self-aware enough to know that scoring alone won't cut it in Boston. He's putting in the work to round out his game, to be trusted in all three zones, because that's what this organization demands, whether you like it or not. Whether he should be embraced as a pure scorer or not, he's committed to improving his game, and that's commendable. On the other side, you have Ryan Bourque stepping into a critical development role in Providence, not just because of his last name, but because he brings firsthand AHL experience, strong player-first coaching style, and credibility from working with elite young talent like Boston's own James Higgins and Cole Eiserman. His hiring reflects the Bruins' commitment to surrounding prospects with modern, relatable mentors who understand today's game. And Marco Sturm is the epitome of that, having come up through the ranks as a coach. Bourque starting his own track now. The emergence of players like Zellers and the hiring of coaches like Bourque show that Boston isn't just chasing talent. They're building a system where that talent can thrive, evolve, and eventually earn a place in the NHL the right way. It's about culture, accountability, and preparing every young Bruin on the ice or behind the bench for the standard that comes with wearing the spoked beat. That's it for today's episode, my friends. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. Thank you so much for subscribing, liking, sharing the podcast. I'd love to have some more guests on. So if you have someone in mind that you would love to hear on the podcast, please tag them on X or drop a comment on YouTube. I would love to know what kind of voices you want to hear on the podcast. The offseason is really slowing down after the initial free agency push. A lot of insiders were promising, trades, it's going to be busier than usual. Not really seeing it, but perhaps that could still come. The Bruins could be still making some moves. They could be adding some PTOs at some point. Who knows? We will remain daily for a little bit here as I wind down for the summer. There will be a bit of a break with some vacation here and there, but still grinding it out every day. So please stick with me here on the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. Be sure to check out the Locked On NHL podcast next as your second listen. There's no offseason. We're bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter most with local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please do take care of yourselves, friends. Take care of each other. And we'll talk to you again here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.